Let's kick things off. Welcome, everyone. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for today's explainer. We are taking a deep dive right into the PMI-ACP Domain 1 material, which, as you know, focuses heavily on the Agile mindset. But actually, scratch that. I want you to totally reframe how you think about this. Don't just look at this as dry material you need to memorize for an exam. What we are really unpacking today is a literal, real-world survival guide for project teams. I mean, if you've ever felt like your projects are just drowning in unexpected changes, or your team is kind of struggling to communicate, well, the concepts we're outlining today are exactly the life raft you've been looking for. Okay, let's dive into this with a question that I want you to ask yourself, and be brutally honest here. Is your team truly agile, or are you just following a rigid plan and calling it agile just because you happen to have a daily stand-up meeting? It is incredibly common for teams to adopt all the fancy agile terminology without ever actually adopting the mindset. And you know what? That mindset is where the real magic happens. To see what that mindset looks like in practice, we've distilled everything down to an easy-to-digest framework. We'll be hitting 4 key stops today. First, the core agile mindset. Second, building a trusting culture. Third, adapting to constant change. And finally, fostering continuous innovation. All right, jumping right into section 1, the core agile mindset and escaping rigid plans. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly when and why we use it. Look, at its absolute foundation, Agile is a philosophy about delivering value. It's not just about ignoring the rules. Check out the traditional mindset side. If you're dealing with a fixed regulatory scope, say you're building a medical device where literally every single requirement is mandated by law and cannot change, then strictly following the original plan is absolutely the right move. Agile is actually the worst approach for that scenario. But look over at the Agile mindset side. When you are dealing with high uncertainty, you simply can't follow an original plan strictly because, well, you don't know what the future holds. So instead, the fundamental principle is to deliver value incrementally. Build a little bit, check if it works, deliver it, and adjust. Which brings us to section 2, building a trusting culture, focusing on transparency and safety. The way your team interacts and establishes shared expectations on a daily basis will completely make or break an Agile project. One of the absolute best tools for this is the working agreement. Now, I want to be super clear about what these are not. They are absolutely not corporate bureaucracy, they aren't meant to increase management hierarchy, and they definitely shouldn't restrict communication. No way. Instead, working agreements are just simple tools intended solely to define shared expectations. They are created by the team, for the team, to build alignment and empower everyone to work together smoothly.
Now, once you have those expectations set, you need radical transparency. And what's the absolute best way to improve that transparency? It's an information radiator. I seriously love this concept. Think of a massive, highly visible chart or a shared digital dashboard that anyone can just glance at and instantly know the project status. It literally radiates information. I mean, think about the alternatives. Private progress tracking where nobody can see it, sending out dry email summaries, or waiting around for weekly executive reports. Those don't build transparency, they just build silos. An information radiator puts the absolute truth front and center for the whole shebang.
But here's the catch. Transparency relies entirely on psychological safety. Imagine a scenario where a team member spots a massive flaw in the code or a deadline they know for sure can't be met, but they hesitate to raise the concern. What's the absolute best response from leadership? Well, you never ever escalate that concern to management to get them in trouble. You definitely don't ignore it either. The only correct Agile response is to encourage open dialogue, because if people don't feel safe raising concerns, your information radiator is just going to be radiating happy little lies. Let's move to and see how this builds into section 3, adapting to constant change and the pivot. Okay, so once you have a team that actually trusts each other, they are perfectly positioned to handle the inevitable curveballs projects throw at them. In Agile, we don't just tolerate late change, we literally embrace it. Picture this, you're deep into development and the customer comes in and changes their requirements super late in the game. In a traditional mindset, that's a total disaster. But here is the actionable Agile response. Step 1, do not panic. You absolutely do not reject the change outright, you don't freeze the scope and refuse to listen, and you definitely do not escalate it immediately. Instead, you move to step 2, evaluate the impact collaboratively. You take that new requirement straight to the team, look at it together, and figure out how it affects your timeline. You work with the change, not against it. And the key mechanism that allows us to evaluate things so quickly is the feedback loop. In Agile, we are constantly trying to shorten our feedback loops. Why? Well, it's definitely not to reduce communication. Honestly, we usually end up talking way more. And it's not to delay changes either. We shorten feedback loops strictly to increase early learning. The faster we get feedback on our work, the faster we learn if we are on the right track or totally off base, which prevents us from wasting weeks or even months of effort. Now, speaking of feedback loops, one of the most vital ones is the retrospective. Could you imagine a meeting where the stated purpose is to assign blame, audit compliance, and report failures? Seriously, it sounds like a complete nightmare. But unfortunately, a lot of poorly run teams treat retrospectives exactly like this. They turn them into witch hunts, which completely destroys all that psychological safety we just talked about building. So the crucial point is this. The true primary purpose of an Agile retrospective is simply to improve continuously. Full stop. It's just the team coming together, looking at the last cycle of work, and asking, hey, how can we be just a little bit better next time? It is entirely about forward-looking growth, not backward-looking punishment. And when a team is improving continuously, feeling safe, and adapting to change, well, they reach what I consider the final level of Agile maturity.
Welcome to Section 4, Fostering Continuous Innovation, the final level.
This is where a team evolves from just getting work done to genuinely creating groundbreaking value. And I want to put this question directly to you right now. Think about your own workplace. How do you foster true innovation? Do new ideas bubble up naturally, or do they get totally crushed under layers of corporate approvals? Innovation isn't just about hiring smart people. It's about the environment those smart people are actually allowed to operate in. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the stark contrast between these two approaches. If you want to absolutely kill your innovation culture, it's super easy. Just penalize failed experiments. Limit your team's autonomy and require endless layers of management approvals for every single new idea. People will literally just stop trying. But the innovation builders, to actually foster that culture, you must actively encourage experimentation. You have to give people the breathing room to try things that might completely fail. Right, so what does that look like practically? Let's say your team isn't sure if a brand new feature will actually provide value to the customers. What should you do first? Step 1, please, do not spend months building the full feature. And don't just delay development or escalate the question up to a sponsor who probably is just guessing anyway. Step 2 is where Agile really shines. Conduct a lightweight experiment. Build a tiny, simplified mock-up and test it out, because Agile heavily favors validating our assumptions as early as possible. Which brings us to our final, overarching thought for this explainer. If your team is absolutely terrified to fail, are you really practicing Agile? Because as we've seen from everything we just unpacked, the Agile mindset literally requires experimentation. It requires open dialogue when things are uncertain. It requires continuous improvement. If the fear of failure is what's driving your project, you might just be following a rigid plan disguised as Agile. Take these concepts back to your teams, start validating those assumptions early, build that psychological safety, and watch your project's potential absolutely skyrocket. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this incredible survival guide.